My dream as a child was to be a soccer player. I injured my knee when I was 20 years old. I had to give up my dream. Later, I suffered from severe arthritis. My leg was in constant pain and sometimes it was very difficult to walk. At first I received conservative treatment, but there was no improvement. During my treatment, I spent a lot of time in prayer and Bible study. Then my doctor suggested that I should have surgery this time because the conservative treatment was not effective. We set a date for the surgery. I contacted my church members and family and asked them to pray for me. On the morning of my surgery, the nurse told me that I was the most relaxed person she had ever seen before the surgery. My wife and children were by my side. They walked me into the operating room, and then they stayed in the waiting room. Once in the operating room, they gave me an anesthetic. When I woke up again, I found myself on the ceiling of the room. I heard the doctor ordering the nurses to get more blood bags. The scene became tumultuous. I saw that my face was pale. I did not feel alarmed or worried. I walked through the walls of the room and into the hospital hallway. I felt no resistance as I passed through the walls or doors. As I reached the first-floor lobby, a man rushed in. His anxiety caught my attention. So I looked at him and noticed that he was wearing a plaid shirt and he was carrying a briefcase. He hurried toward the operating room, slowing down at the entrance to the operating room. There was a conversation with another doctor. I don't remember their conversation, but I know the man was also a doctor. Suddenly, I began to drift upward. I passed through the ceiling of the hospital, as if pulled by some mysterious force. I continued to rise until I passed through the roof and found myself over the hospital. After I exited the hospital, I began to go over the city at a faster speed. I was moving faster and faster and I felt the wind blowing past me. It was almost winter by then. But I didn't feel the cold at all. Finally, I entered a cave-like place and there was a small bright light in front of me. I came into the light. I saw the back of a man, and I subconsciously thought I should follow him. He had very long hair, he was wearing a long white robe of rough material and sandals on his feet. We walked up a flight of steps and before us was a gorgeous idyllic scene. The meadow was covered with bright flowers, which I had never seen before. There was a small river on the prairie. We came to the river and on the other side I saw loved ones who had died. They were gathered together. I saw my grandfather and my brother first. They saw me too, and they were as excited as I was. Then I noticed one person I didn't recognize. I later learned that it was my great-grandfather, who had died before I was born, so I had never met him. I could communicate with them telepathically. I couldn't remember what they were wearing or even what they looked like, but it was definitely their spirit. When I thought about hugging them on the other side, my guide who was leading me telepathically told me that I had to go somewhere else first and that I had to follow him. I followed him around a bend in the road. I saw a Greek-style building in the distance. It was vibrant white. There were many steps leading up to it, with huge columns in front. Many people were wearing vibrant white robes. They were milling around outside, going in and out. My guide led me inside. Inside was a huge library filled with books. My guide told me that it contained the book of life as described in the Bible. We walked to the back room where some people were sitting on chairs with a big screen in the middle. They told me that I would see my past life. But just as importantly, I was able to experience the impact of my actions on others. After watching, no one came out and criticized me. But I felt a great deal of guilt inside for the people I had hurt. Then they showed me what was going to happen to me in the future. If I choose to go back to Earth, some things will happen and some things will not necessarily happen. I next saw the scene in the hospital where the doctor who operated on me and my wife were talking and the child was sitting on the couch in the hallway. I wasn't able to hear their conversation, I just saw the scene. I saw images of family and friends saying prayers. Each prayer appeared like a note and one after another, stretching toward where I was. I remembered when I was a little boy and I prayed that my grandfather would not die. But my prayers were not answered, and my grandfather died anyway. My children cannot live without their father. As hard as it was to leave this place of love, I knew I had to go back. They told me that the things I had seen would be erased from my memory. If I am allowed to keep those memories, future lives will probably be changed. I would also keep some memories that would allow me to believe that my experiences were real. It wasn't long before I woke up in a hospital bed with my wife and children standing next to me. I knew my experience was real. God's love was with me throughout those weeks. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. First in the intensive care unit and then in the general ward. I believed I would recover because I knew I was back here for a reason. At first I didn't tell my family what I was going through. I still remember how surprised I was when the doctor who saved me came to visit me for the first time. We had never met before that time, and he was the doctor in the plaid shirt. This doctor was very warm and kind. Shortly after I got home, I shared my experience with my wife. I told her, while I was in surgery, I lost so much blood that my soul left my body and walked out of the operating room. I saw the doctor, and I didn't know who he was or why he was there at the time. How he was hurrying towards the operating room and was wearing a plaid shirt and carrying a bag. This surprised my wife. Because at that time, she also saw this doctor in the hallway.
Today is my father's birthday and my husband and I are going to celebrate his birthday together. My father has always been strong and my mother passed away when he was very young. He did not choose to remarry and he gave so much to the family. As he got older, his health deteriorated. I would love to bring him home to live with us, but he prefers to live in the old house he used to live in. We prepared a sumptuous dinner. After dinner, my husband and I returned home. When I was ready to go to bed, my breathing became difficult. Feeling like I was going to die, my husband called the emergency number. I was in an extreme panic. I needed to get to the hospital as soon as possible. My consciousness started to become fuzzy. I said, "Baby, when are they coming?" He said, "Soon." He held my hand and kept reassuring me. I saw a black figure in the corner of the room. It stayed there the whole time and it was signaling me to walk towards it. I was terrified. I didn't know what it wanted, maybe it wanted my soul. Could it be one of Satan's men? It looked like an evil spirit. The paramedics arrived at our apartment and they checked my condition. My blood pressure and heart rate were low, and the EMTs asked if I could stand up. I stood up and then fell back down. They brought a stretcher and carried me from my apartment building to the ambulance. In the ambulance, I was very scared. I said, "No. I'm dying, help me." Suddenly, all the lights turned black. I thought to myself, okay, I'm dead. Then my soul left my body and I was being chased by a demon. I believe it was the dark figure in my bedroom. The demon told me, I will never see my husband and father again. There was nothing I could do but try to get away from this monster. I think it had been watching me for some time. I suddenly heard a voice that was very familiar. This voice shouted my name. It was my nickname as a child. As I lay there, it sounded like it was calling me. Everything turned black again. I was in a dark space. I was suspended in the air and I couldn't see anything. I couldn't feel my body. I started calling out for help. And to my surprise, my voice was so small that it was as if I was the only one who could hear it. I kept calling out. I just thought that I had to get back to my family. I didn't want to die. I kept shouting, "Please help me, please help me. Please." I felt like I was relieved. I started to fall downward. That's when I started to panic, and I remember my father kept telling me that if you repent you won't go to hell. I believed at that moment that I was falling into the depths of hell. I could hear the screams all around me. I was falling and falling. I also remember my father telling me that if you pray to God for forgiveness, you won't go to hell. I began to pray. I prayed to God, "Please forgive my sins." I prayed to you, "Don't let me die." Finally, I stopped falling. I landed on a rolling boulder. It felt like my feet were burning, and I could smell the burning flesh all around me. I still couldn't see anything. I heard a voice say, "Son, your time has not yet come. You must climb up and get out of here." I started climbing up. The walls are wet here and I keep slipping. Some of the rocks were hot. I heard screams and people shouting at me. "You can't get up there, you can't save yourself if you try harder." I kept climbing anyway. I got to the very top. Someone held out a hand. I saw a figure, but couldn't make out a face. A dazzling light emanated from around him. All I know is that when I reached the top, I got help. I believe that hand was Jesus. His hand was so strong and powerful. His touch was so warm. His presence was so miraculous. I didn't believe in God at one time, because I had been having a hard time in my life. Now I feel like God is right there with me, and everything is going to be okay. I heard a voice saying, "Son, you must go back, your family is waiting for you. But before I send you back, I have to show you something." I saw what had happened in the past. I saw the scene. I was stealing my father's money, because I wanted to buy a toy I wanted. I saw the whole thing happen as if I was standing right next to it watching. When I was little, our family was not rich. I stole money from my father several times. I know now that my father knew every time I stole money from the family. But he didn't blame me. This made me very ashamed. He asked me, "What have I learned through this? If I could go back in time, would I change anything?" I said, "I regret the situation very much. If I could go back in time, this would not have happened." I felt how stupid I was at the time. Next, I saw my 19-year-old self. I lied to my father and told him I would be home late for a school event. In fact, I was out on a date with my boyfriend. I saw many more of these visions, not all of them bad, but also some that made people happy. I learned something from each scenario. I need to work on correcting a lot of things in my life. Suddenly, everything stopped and I was in a bright white room. Maybe it wasn't a room, I was just surrounded by light. I saw my grandmother, who passed away a few years ago. She looked so beautiful, and she said to me, "Your time has not come yet. We are not ready for you to come here yet. Your husband and father are still waiting for you, and you have to go back." I said, I don't know how to go back. She pointed in the direction of my left. So I went that way, and I went back into my body. I knew I was back and I knew I was safe. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. My kidneys completely healed themselves. I had been anemic for years. My hemoglobin is all normal now. I made it back. Jesus saved me because I proved myself.